for this reason. Some lack of privacy, some smaller storage, or noise problem, something like that. I was able to see this news. It's so terrible, and I will never buy new apartment in Sydney, and it's bad to live in. Why? That experience has triggered me to research at here, although I immediately realized there's a big challenge to me, that is English score coordination. But anyway, I eventually started for PhD at here with my fantastic supervisors about this topic, how to design their apartment. I focused on specifically 3 local government areas. There is City of Sydney, City of Parramatta, Liverpool City. They are geographically different areas, like some inner Sydney, middle Sydney, and outer Sydney. And also, they have a higher proportion of apartment buildings as dwelling structure in each geography, and they have a higher proportion of new apartment buildings, and they have higher proportion of family with children living there in each geography. So I focus on the design of individual units, in particular for family with children. This is because there is increasing number of family with children living in there, but there are some concern about some propriety of apartment design for them, and also there are some lack of design choice for them. And also, I'm particularly interested in the spatial layout. This is because it is very important, because they can influence on resident behavior, and therefore can affect residential satisfaction. So my research investigates some ways to deliver better apartment design, in particular for family with children. To do this, I've explored first what units are delivered, second, what unit layout is desired by family with children, and third, are they meet the desires of family with children? Then, what should we do to improve this quality? It aims to inform some considerations for better apartment design, in particular for family with children, to architects and developers and some professionals in government. As first stage, I collected some floor unit of around 370 unit plans, which are being built or completed in specific 3 local government areas, and determined some typologies with these 3 distinct features of spatial layout. First type is that is characterized by central shared spaces. So we must access these shared spaces, which is our living room, dining room, kitchen, to access other rooms from the entrance. Type 1.1 has the groups of private spaces, and type 1.2 has the separation of private spaces. And second type is the central inner hall or corridor types, which plays an important role as some circulation spaces. So at this point, we can access all other rooms in a unit without passing some shared spaces. Last type is the combination of type 1 and 2. So some of rooms can be accessed by through this inner hall or corridor. Others, we should cross these shared spaces to access other rooms. These all three typologies are found across all three local government areas, but they are unevenly distributed with the predominance of type 1, in particular in smaller units like 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. This can be understood by the preference of developers. Many of developers interviewed said they desire this type 1 rather than other typology, because this type 1 has the good layout to satisfy both regulatory factors. For example, daylight access or natural ventilations into inhabitable rooms of many of units in a floodplain. And second, they can meet the market needs of particular investors who want more larger rooms without some space waste by some service area. But architects and family children interviewed desired type 2 rather than other type because of its usability. The usability came from the inner hall or corridor, and this also contribute to some spatially independent shared spaces without passing, without using the movement. So from the in-depth interview with family children, I coded and structured these things on the desires of family children in terms of the spatial layout. For the healthcare condition to live, many of parents interviewed mentioned solar and daylight access or natural ventilation or very good view. For the better and easier condition to live, many of people significantly mentioned some issues of supervision, privacy, or safe kitchen and balcony, or different locations of specific rooms or different layout of shared spaces. I found three different types of desires. First one is generally universal desire for healthier condition to live. Second type is somewhat consistent desires by the age of children. For example, family with younger children more desired some layout, more facilitating for more easier supervision, but family with older children more desired the privacy rather than other desires. Also, there are some diverse desires by the personal taste or cultural background. These desires can be delivered by all or some of typologies, just except some safety issue, safe balcony and kitchen, with a focus on the accessibility, because generally designed it shared spaces by open plan system. In addition, many parents mentioned more effective or comfortable natural ventilations of their units. Based on this finding, I discussed some aspects to be kept. For example, spatial layout to enable more natural ventilation, or spatial layout facilitating supervision or more strengthened private room. I also discussed the aspects we improved, which are not delivered by typology and which can be improved by some design principles in current literatures. They are the layout to enable more efficient cross ventilation or lateral ventilation of unit. And another thing is some spatial layout to enable more safer balcony or kitchen, or spatial layout to enable more diverse layout of shared spaces. To achieve these aspects, I've discussed 2 points of some consideration, that is design consideration and other consideration. I discussed some design considerations, such as some elevation or layout design, in particular location of balcony to enable more efficient cross ventilation or natural ventilation. And another thing is I've discussed some design principles like flexibility or adaptability to enable more diverse layout of shared spaces. And also, I also discussed some layout issue to improve the restriction of direct access of children into, in particular, balcony or kitchen from the living room. To support this design consideration, I discussed some 3 points. First point is the improvement of apartment design guideline, design regulation, in particular focused on the safety issue and ventilation issue. And second point is some potential ways to support some design activities, like, for example, user-engaged design approach to reflect more desires of residents into unit design. And the last point is the potential issues of delivery practice, which can be supported by some government. This is some government rule. Yes, this is my PhD. I would appreciate some comments or advice about this project for my PhD, rather than very critical questions. Because I would like to submit my PhD soon, so I want to make my thesis more concretely based on your opinion. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So basically, like from last meeting, we did discuss that. So people from online will get first preference, first go at the questions, and then we come to like people who are physically present. So we can start from people who are online. Any questions? Yes. Okay, so then let me open the floor for people who are present in the lab.
I have a proud supervisor comment. Hyungmo, that was a very, very good job of describing a whole PhD clearly in a short amount of time. Yeah. Well done.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Have you, when was the PhD done? Was it quite?
I started 2017. So
okay. How was the impact of COVID? Have you seen the changes to maybe the way you're thinking with apartment design? Because there's a big shift in the way that people work and live, yeah, based on the impact of COVID. So for example, we're working on apartments at the moment in Carinbar. Carinbar has a particular requirement, Sutherlandshire particularly has a requirement for larger quantity of livable and larger quantity of accessible. So it's 20% accessible and 10% livable. So it's empty nesters, and generally, because the shape of the block itself, we've had to provide really deep units. So because of the ADG guidelines, we're limited by the 18 meters and the 8 meters. So we've introduced a lot of studies and spaces like that for which, but it was pre-COVID, and they've actually become, they might be more valuable in the future because they're live work places where people like myself who are doing like 50% in the office and 50% at home have a space which, when you have older kids, you can separate yourself quite with an acoustically sealed space for an office. Now you can go in and separate yourself from your day-to-day, and then you have a transition space between your living and your working space, which I feel will be probably something that needs to be considered for the future. And likewise, in apartment design, we've got large areas of terrace and large areas of L-shaped podium decks with shaded landscaping and a lot of those sort of things which will be useful for large families. So, and it gives you the flexibility to kind of in the future to change that arrangement. So the living conditions change, or if you want to give ownership to your child to have part of ownership of that space, then they have a stakeholder in the future of actually owning that place, separate from the mother and father. Just a thought.
Yes, I agree with your opinions. I was also thought due to the COVID, we need to more flexible layout, as well as also we need to more some semi-private outdoor spaces, because that is more that can make more healthier condition to live, I think.
Well done, Hyungmo. I was just wondering, did you have the opportunity to speak to any kids as part of the research?
No, I just speak with some parents.
Yeah, okay. It'd just be interesting to know if they had different perspectives on what they want in living spaces as well.
That is my future.
Yeah, there's always another project.
It's funny you should mention that, because the ADG.
Someone else had asked a question as well in the chat.
Sorry.
That's right.
Yeah. I
You
think
might want to pull the chat up.
Bruce has hand up before that video.
Yes, thank you. My question is, your focus is very much on layout types. How important is floor area, room sizes, and balcony size?
Yes, I think from my interview, I realized the size is very important, but my research just focused on the layout issue. But I think I convinced layout is very important, because many people said after interview, many people said they realized layout is very important, and also some people said they choose this house due to this layout. So yeah, size is important thing, but I think layout is also important for making better living environments.
One interesting finding from Hyungmo's study, he compared the sizes of the units of the families he interviewed with the Canadian occupancy standard, and he also asked them whether they felt that they were overcrowded or not. And quite a few of the families were overcrowded by the Canadian standard, but didn't feel that they were overcrowded because of the way that they use the units.
Yeah.
And I think that's it's an interesting finding. If the units are laid out or flexible enough, that standard of overcrowding, technically overcrowded, doesn't feel overcrowded.
Yes, that is my part of my PhD. But I didn't include this presentation.
So we have like another online question from Xiang. So basically, it says, great presentation, thank you very much. Are there places in the world that do type 2 kind of apartments or family apartments well?
Question?
Yes, yeah. Are there any places in the world where like they do the type 2 apartments?
Yes. I know some case of type 2 in the case of apartment in Japan and Korea. But for example, in Korea, they can choose the type when they want to buy some apartment buildings. That is similar with some of the plan, but they can choose and they can design. I think this is because I don't know it is the answer about this question, but this is some different things between Australia and Korea. I think in my perspective, in Korea, some buyers are mostly future owner, but in the Australia, buyers mostly some investor rather than owner occupier. So if some apartment in Korea will be sold, some people cannot choose some design. I think the apartment cannot sell. So yeah, type 2 is existing in other countries, and I think that is more preferred by users.
That's good. So I have a Value Australia question, because like we're working in valuation and like pricing of property. Does the types correlate with like pricing of the property? Like does any of the spatial layout is preferred in terms of pricing?
I read some literatures about relationship between the layout and cost, sale cost. This is some example of a Japan and Korea study. But the conclusion said some layout can influence some sale price. Yeah, because that is more preferred type will be more better sale. So they have some relationship. Yeah.
Cool. And Christopher Robinson has
Hey, so my question was, you mentioned that the families tend to prefer the type 2. Did you do any work, or do you plan on doing any work on whether that's reflected in the actual occupation of the apartments? Like, are people renting out the type 2s more frequently than the type 1s? Is there any economic data that shows that? Or have you looked into any economic data that shows that? Thanks.
I didn't read some reference about this question, but one of developers interview said they try to provide some different types of layout based on the targeted local government area. But one of the strategy they try to do is some flexible unit layout in particular shared spaces. So yeah, I didn't see some reference about this question, but I heard some issue related to this question from my interview.
Yeah, so we have a final question from Rupa.
Hi, Hyungmo.
Hi.
I conducted interviews during COVID with developers and real estate agents who specialize in selling apartments off the plan. Some general commentary about, layout of apartments, which supposedly was linked to purchaser preferences, which were very much skewed towards investors, as you point out, pre-COVID, was that they wanted flexible layouts to cater for potential multiple multiple rental occupiers. So group share households, you know, the apartments could be rented out to maybe a main tenant who then sublets those apartments. So they wanted flexibility in the layout to cater for multiple occupiers. But after COVID, there seemed to be a shift from the investor buyer group to the owner occupier buyer group. And there was lots of discussion about, you know, in the past or in the boom period when investors were very active, this is what the layout and this is what the preferences were. But COVID has restructured what people are looking for in apartments. They're wanting more space, they're wanting more storage, they're wanting indoor outdoor flow, they want more green access to green space. So there seemed to be, COVID seemed to have restructured the buyer typology, but also the preferences from the perspectives of agents and developers as well. So it was more of a comment and my observations of my research, which might help you. I'm happy to have a separate chat as well.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, everyone. It's a really interesting talk. And so our next speaker is Josephine. So keeping up with the diverse background of CFRC people, like Josephine has a civil engineering background, and she has extensive experience in transport infrastructure construction. And she's also a PhD student with CFRC, and she's also working with the Value Australia project. And she's going to talk to us about walkability and its effect on pricing. I'll just change the presentation. Yeah, so you should be able to present.
It's only one screen, so I'm going to throw my notes here.
Okay, cool.
Research section conclusion.
Yeah, okay.
Especially around the cost questions and value.
Cool. Yep. Click up on with the images.
Thank you. Cool. That's weird. Hey, yeah, my name is Josephine. I have a whole joke here about how the Value Australia people could like go to the pub early because they've heard my walkability talk already, but then they didn't turn up. So I'm glad that everyone else wanted to hear about this. Yes, my PhD is in city futures with Chris Pettit and Brian Lee, and it's based on all the property value data in the Value Australia project, but I'm more interested in transport infrastructure. So looking at the implications of accessibility and location on property value. Connected. Yeah, so this is a map of Sydney. And if we were just talking about apartments, if we have an apartment here, it's about working out what is the value of that location, distinct from the value of that's intrinsic to the property, like its size, age, features, and so on. And there's some very long-established theories about why we see land prices increasing in proximity to a city centre, for example. And although these theories were originally based on productive land and markets in the centre of cities, they do seem to transfer to a modern city where the CBD is the centre of like the knowledge and service-based economy. And so people's labour is the key input, and commute lengths are a major determinant of property prices. So in any of our like existing hedonic pricing models in Value Australia, the distance to CBD and other employment centres is a really big factor. But it's not the only story of location. People also seem to value the local neighbourhood around the house. And in a lot of ads nowadays, you'll see things like walkable neighbourhood. And that's the concept that I focused on for this piece of work. We started with, so this is rent.com.au, which is like one of the main rental listing sites. And literally every apartment listing now and house listing has this walk score on it, which is featured prominently, the same as number of bedrooms and bathrooms. And that's kind of this indication that that might be important for people looking at places to buy. So, and I also thought walkability was a good place to start my looking at accessibility in my PhD because it's a little bit simpler than other modes. So look at that. So this walk score metric comes from the US, and I can't get it in high detail for research in Australia, but this is a suburb level walk score for all of Sydney, which, as you can see, is related to like centrality, but it's not exactly the same. So this is the data that I've started with, and I started running some hedonic proxy models, and I found that it does have a significant impact, particularly on house prices, not so much on units. And yeah, and this is based on the APM sales data for 2019 in Sydney, so it's like 40,000 house sales and 25,000 unit sales. So we can find like quite small distinctions in there. I also did some models using intersection density and kilometres of road length, but found walk score was the best performing one. So before I dig into like why this might be different from suburbs and units, you're probably wondering like, what is walk score? Why do you keep talking about this? So that's related to walkability metrics in general. What is this idea of walkability? And there's a really big literature on walkability. There's probably like 500 papers on walkability and health alone, and they use a lot of different definitions. Some are focused more on pleasantness of walking, so things like shade, footpath width, amount of car traffic, noise. And look at property value, I think that probably has some impact. It's quite hard to measure. Things like shade, looking at tree cover from satellite imagery is just really hard. Never mind like inclines and car traffic. And it also can be mixed with street appeal for property value in general. So that's something that I've steered away from at this point in my research, so that's probably important. Then there are a lot of metrics that rely on measures of built form, like network connectivity of roads, density, population, and land use mix. And they're usually quite easy and quick to measure and widely available, but can be hard to interpret, like what exactly that means. If you're saying somewhere's walkable just because it has a high connectivity in terms of intersection density, what does that actually mean? And I think those things are kind of proxies for what I prefer to focus on, which is walking distance to destinations as the main component of walkability. It's something that's been a little bit limited in the past by just, I think, computing power. You start looking at this for all of Sydney and it's like millions of points of houses versus thousands of destinations. But there's some advances that I think you can use there. So you go back to walk score, it is a proprietary formula, but when it was based on academic work, and it is also based on destination accessibility is the main element, with a small inclusion of population density and network connectivity factors. So what that means is there's a series of different categories, count the number of destinations in each category, how far away they are, weighted by a distance to key function, and come up with this score of walkability. So so looking at this field as a whole, most of this work, there's say 500 papers, is about this relationship of walkability to health, because as mediated by propensity to walk. So saying that if the area is more walkable, people are more likely to walk. That would be good for their health. There's been a lot of money funding research looking at that. Looking at property value is a lot less, I found like 20 papers that directly relate walkability to property value. And it's tempting to just take metrics that have been validated on health data and apply them to property value. And I guess that is where I started, because walk score, for example, was developed for health research. But I feel that there may be different factors that are involved, and that potentially validating things separately through property value is going to be more important for that Australia. So, but there's a lot of work there that provides guidance on how to construct metrics and how to compare metrics, and yeah. Yeah, so that's probably the first limitation of using walk score. And the second thing that I could only get at the suburb level in Australia. Not for all suburbs, although it's good for Sydney, but also it's not transparent as to what factors are going into that, what groups of destinations, or what even the decay function is. So the obvious next step is to try and come up with our own walkability metrics for Value Australia. And that's what I've been working on at the moment. So it's doing our own measurements of destinations, travel time between properties, and then something transparent where when we come up with a valuation, we can say what's going into it. And experimenting with weightings and the distance decay to find out what suits Australian cities. And the non-enclosed model is the best. So I was hoping to add, I've added a few more slides here, but this is an example looking at Mollay Creek, which is where I live in Sydney. So this is showing in red the location of all grocery type of stores. And then the dots are all intersections that are coloured according to the closeness and variety of those stores that are available near them. So we can do this for a whole range of destinations and combine the different ways to get different walkability measures. So if you look at that on for all of Sydney, it looks, there's probably millions of points there, so it's hard to get enough resolution into this actual slide. But if you compare it to walk score, it's obviously similar patterns, but they're much higher degree of detail. And I think that will help resolve some of the problems. With results, particularly not showing that it was significant for unit results. So I might try to go back to, is it actually here? Okay. So this is just a map showing another part of Sydney, down the Shire, and just where house sales are and where unit sales are. And it's pretty typical in that the units are clustered around this radial train line to the city. There's not many units further out. So when you look at things at an aggregate level, like suburbs, for houses, you can see the distinction between a suburb like this Lilly and Caringbah, where this has a lower walkability score. And this is more moderate. And so for houses, you can see that the difference in prices. But you can't necessarily see that for units because all the units are next to the stations and they have a high walk score. So I'm thinking that's why the initial results didn't show significance for units, even though I really expected that. So the next step is to, with our own measurements, redo the results and try and do some more sophisticated analyses like a geographically weighted regression, maybe to see what destinations are more important in different parts of Sydney. Like we think there may be parts of Sydney where walking to school is more important than other parts, or walking to parks or something like that. So so that is the next steps. And that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Josephine. And we'll take questions from online people first.
Yeah.
That's
Very good.
There's a question. Yeah. Oh, where did that go?
Really interesting. Thanks. Does the score take into account green spaces?
No, at the moment I'm not looking at green spaces. One reason is that we have other people working on it in Value Australia. And to me, that makes more sense conceptually because I see there's a lot of complication between, is an area walkable because people want to walk under the tree canopy? Okay, that might contribute to property prices, but the trees themselves may be contributing to property prices as well, if that makes sense. And it's really hard to differentiate that. So we do have people looking at green views and green spaces, but I'm not looking at it at this point.
Okay, we can move to at the lab. Anybody have questions? Any questions from the lab? Well,
It was a really interesting presentation. Thanks, Josephine. I was just wondering, sort of thinking about that geographic weighted regression that you're thinking of doing. I was just wondering how you were going to set that up. I was sort of, are you going to run the GWR for different different locations and then run their walkability score at different locations and see whether you get significant results for each different location?
I would probably be putting the walkability into my model as a series of separate factors for separate categories. Yeah. And then doing the weighted regression at like a SA1 level, probably.
And so you run walkability on each different location.
Yeah.
And then and then is the end goal to combine it into some singular walkability metric, or just to have gain insight on each different location?
Possibly, like a single walkability metric may be useful, particularly for like the commercial side of going Australia work and being able to show that to people and saying that's why that property is more valuable without going into the extreme detail of it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Similar, I guess, to tree cover, but steepness and hilly terrain.
Yeah, I really like to work something in that is a general disutility rather than just distance, or I think what's the other word that like a generalized cost for all modes, but including for walking. That would incorporate steepness, potentially travel time, like where walking was blocked by a major road, for example, they'll often add to travel time, and it's more important than just straight line distance. But yes, future work is when.
Some of my worst memories are carrying shopping around the hills of Coogee in summertime, and
Yeah. And that's where Parramatta's a winner because it's all flat. I used to live there.
Does your study cover the extreme heat towns and cities? And
No. Yeah,
Penrith is almost unwalkable obviously in summer, so.
It is an outstanding thing, definitely. I'm not sure. Again, it's one of those things that I feel may come into probably value separately because it also makes it unlivable. Although with aircon in all the new places in Penrith, that may not be such an issue. I guess the other thing with these is like, how much do people actually take that into account when they're buying it? Because they buy it on a cool day, they don't even realise. That can be one of the issues with property values. People's actual behaviour can differ from what they think their behaviour would be. Like they buy the house with the pool and then they never go to the pool, but the pool probably added to the house price anyway. And walkability may be a bit like that in how attractive it is to books. So yeah, I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. That's it.
Because in the Carambar apartment we've had to introduce a pedestrian corridor to increase the height of the building. But within that pedestrian corridor, we've introduced misting as part of that corridor. So it improves the walkability of the space, but it also becomes a place where you have alfresco cafes and stuff as well. So.
Well, you can have better shade as well. It's internal as well.
Yeah, well, it's also powered by PV panels, which are part of the awning canopy, so it's all part of that holistic system. So,
yeah. Anyone else? I have one question. Earlier you mentioned that for units, the walkability score has no significant price impact. But why do you think that might be?
I think that was just with my results using walks for a suburb level. And I think it will go away. I have actually redone the walks with my new data, but it's just not I'm not quite ready to show it yet. Checked everything. And I think it's because, well, first of all, the suburbs that units are sold in are much more clustered. They're all around a 70 to 80 walk score, whereas houses show a full range. So I think it's not kind of differentiating between that as well. And also the issue of where the units are within the suburbs. So yeah, so that's why I think the aggregate measure, certainly at that scale, is just not useful for walkability.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Sounds good. Any other questions on the online side? No. So we can. Thank you very much, Josephine. That was a really interesting talk, and I think like we are looking forward to the results for the Value Australia project as well. So concluding. So thanks everyone for coming, and I think that we had around like 35 people like today. Improvement from last time. Last time we had around like 38, 32. So slowly getting numbers up. At the same time, like we also like had like a lot of things changed, fine-tuned for this sem, so less tech troubles this time. So slowly learning how to do like hybrid events well. And I would like to thank Ali for organizing all this. So yeah, so really great help like getting everything done. And finally, like next event. So next event is next week. Like so, we initially planned it to be like fortnightly series, but since last week was a public holiday, so we had to move that here. So next one, next event is on 16th of April. So that will be next Friday, and that would be like our speaker for that day is Professor Hal Wasson, and he's going to talk to us about impact of COVID in homelessness and renting houses. So we've done like few works like in property prices, buying, but renting, I think this will be the first time I'm going to see. So it will be a very interesting talk, and he's going to give a long form talk of like 40 minutes. So same thing, like so, like we will announce the send out the Eventbrite link for the next event like by Monday, so that there's no confusion in it. And hope to see you all next time. And we also have a booking for 10 people in the White House. So if you guys want to come along, have a chat with the speakers, more questions, you're welcome.
Bye.